Exercise 4 deals with histology. This is looking at tissues. So we move up from the cellular type and look at when you have a couple different types of cells working together for a certain function, they form a tissue. Now in the human body, all tissue can be classified as one of four main types. Those four main types are epithelial, connective, muscle, and then nervous tissue. So we're going to look at each of these. Starting with epithelial tissue. Epithelial tissue is always found covering an exposed surface. So it has one side of it is free or open, such as like with the skin. There is very little extracellular matrix, if any. Extracellular matrix is material that's between the cells on the outside. So typically you have, with epithelial tissue, the cells are right up next to each other with nothing between them. One characteristic of epithelial tissue is that it's avascular, meaning there are no blood vessels in it. So typically it's very thin because it's dependent upon diffusion for those nutrients and oxygen to get to it from underlying tissue of a different type that does have the blood vessels in it. The dead or damaged cells tend to slough off, and cells within epithelial tissue tend to go through mitosis rather rapidly, so they can repair the damage and replace themselves. Overall, the function is for protection. It may also be involved with secretion of whether it's oils or other protective compounds. Helps to control permeability, what's allowed in or out. An example would be on the skin, what's allowed to diffuse through the skin into the body. So how do we classify epithelial tissue? You're going to find each tissue type is classified using its own specific kind of method. With epithelial tissue, we look at two different things. Number one, how many cell layers does it have? If it's only one layer thick, it's called simple. If it's multiple layers, it's called stratified. Then you look at the shape of the cells. If it's rectangular shape, we call it columnar. If it's square, then it's called cuboidal. And if it's flattened or looks like it's been squished, it's squamous. So you put those together. You could have simple squamish epithelium. That means it's simple, one layer. Squamous, they look flattened, as you can see at the very top of this table. You could have stratified squamous. Well, now you've got flattened cells, but it's multiple layers. Pseudostratified columnar epithelial, because these are columnar, they're rectangular shaped cells, the nuclei are not all necessarily lined up like you see in the simple. The pseudostratified, because the nuclei for each cell, it's in a different location. So just glancing at it, it may look like it's multi-layered, but in reality, it's only single layered. Connective tissue, its purpose or function is that it helps to support other areas of the body, helps to protect. As the name implies, it may connect one type of tissue to another. Oftentimes it's right below epithelial, so it's connecting epithelial tissue to maybe muscle, etc. It helps to transport fluids and nutrients, and chemical messengers and waste products. It helps to insulate the body, and it can also be used as an energy storage. So connective tissue is composed of the cells, but now something that's different from epithelial is that now you do have this extracellular matrix. You have this material that's outside the cells, between adjacent cells. And what is this extracellular matrix? Number one, it may have protein fibers, and then it also has what we call a ground substance. So how do you classify connective tissue? It's going to be classified by, number one, looking at the type of fibers, those protein fibers that are present in that extracellular material, and what type of ground substance is there. So there's three main types or categories of connective tissue. You have, number one, connective tissue proper, two, supportive connective tissue, or three, fluid connective tissue. This table does show these three different types and examples of those. So connective tissue proper, this can be things like adipose tissue, which is fat tissue, areolar tissue, supportive connective tissue. This is some of your different types of cartilage, um, bone, etc. Then fluid, this would be things like blood. Blood is actually considered a tissue, which a lot of people don't think about that, but it is a tissue. So some, once again, types of loose connective tissue, adipose, areolar, and reticular. In this drawing, it is showing both a schematic drawing as well as an electron micrograph or a microscope picture of adipose or fat tissue. Dense connective tissue, here you have different types. We then further divide it as, is it regular dense or irregular dense? It has to do with how the fibers are oriented. Those, as you can see, some of these are collagen fibers in there. That's part of those protein fibers that are present. Cartilage, these are three different types of cartilage: hyaline cartilage, fiber cartilage, and elastic cartilage. Once again, are going to be divided by how the cells are and the fibers that are present in there. Bone is, we're still talking about connective tissue, so it is a type of connective tissue. It's obviously very hard. It helps to provide both protection and support. In terms of the ground substance, it does have collagen fibers. That helps to allow for flexibility, support. And then you have got some of the minerals in there, such as calcium phosphate, to help with this hardness and strength providing. The bone is very highly vascular, so it has a lot of blood supply to it. The cells are very actively growing. Osteocytes are a type of cells. We'll get into those when we study the bone itself. Fluid connective tissue. Here's, as I said earlier, an example of the blood. And let's see if we can see over here. These are red blood cells right here. All of these, the most numerous one. This right here is called a lymphocyte or a white blood, this type of white blood cell. Sometimes in this drawing you don't see it, but sometimes you will see platelets. They will look like little tiny purple dots that are present in there. So you've got your epithelial, you have your connective tissue. Muscle tissue is the third type. Muscle tissue is specialized so that it will respond to different stimuli. It allows for movement. It has a special property that's able to contract and then restore back to the original shape after the contraction is done. There's three different types of muscle tissue. There's skeletal, cardiac, and smooth. Skeletal muscle is voluntary, so you can control the movement of it. When you look at it under the microscope, it is striated, meaning it looks like it has a striping pattern to it. As you'll see in a moment when looking at it, it will look as though all the cells, the muscle cells are lying parallel, kind of on top of each other. Cardiac muscle, this is found only in the heart. It is under involuntary control, so you don't have any conscious control over when it contracts. It is just like skeletal muscle that it is striated. It has a striping pattern when you look at it. And I'll show you in a bit some things that you can use to help to distinguish between the two. Smooth muscle, the third type, also is involuntary like cardiac. However, it is non-striated. Smooth muscle is found lining a lot of the organs in the abdominal and pelvic area. So when you look at a slide, you'll notice at the top you have skeletal muscle, and notice how it looks like all the cells are just lining up parallel, just evenly one on top of the other. The smooth muscles in the middle, it does not have that striping pattern. And then the cardiac muscle has a lot more branching to it than what you would see with skeletal muscle. So that's something that you can use to help to distinguish between them. This table does show some of the differences between the function and where they're located and what they look like of those three different muscle types. Nervous tissue is the fourth type of tissue. It is able to receive and generate electrical impulses, so we say it's excitable. It does respond to these electrical charges. There's two main types of nervous tissue. Probably the one most people are familiar with is the neuron, which is the specialized cell that actually can receive these electrical impulses. And then the neuroglial are the supporting cells. So the neurons, which make up part of the nervous tissue, tend to have a characteristic shape to them, in that you can over here kind of see that cell body with the nucleus right here in the middle, and then you can see it a little bit off of here, these long strands. That is still part of the cell. It's what we call the axon that extends on. This is where it's going to generate that electrical impulse down. And that's unique to, as I said, nervous tissue. So those are the 4 different types of tissue. Be able to look at pictures and generally be able to distinguish, not necessarily, oh, is this elastic cartilage, but is it connective tissue versus muscle tissue versus nervous. So be familiar with your 4 types: epithelial, connective, muscle, nervous.